Welcome to the Global Longevity Association podcast. My name is Ella Devar, and I'm so excited to be interviewing Dr. Amanda Hanson, one of the most sought after clinical psychologists all over the world. And she's what's called midlife muse. I absolutely love having her today because she will be telling us or sharing some of the wisdom related to women's health. And as you guys know, I'm very passionate about it and I'm so excited to have her. Most women are struggling, especially during midlife. You won't believe it. Like, even when I say midlife, the next thing I want to say is crisis because that's what most people associate midlife with. Definitely not with a lot of inspiration. And I feel like we do need a muse. Dr. Amanda, thank you so much for being here today. Could you please share a little bit about yourself and what you do as a midlife muse?
Absolutely. Thank you for such a beautiful introduction. I have been a clinical psychologist for over 26 years, and I found that traditional psychology was often leaving women empty as far as really deep solutions that they needed for their lives. So I started using a lot more somatic practices in my work and started edging further and further away from talk therapy and incorporating a lot of somatics and then bringing in some really ancient practices to incorporate for movement and getting in touch with things that are inside of women's bodies that have been conditioned to feel like there was something wrong or bad about how they're feeling. So I do a lot of somatic practices combined with traditional clinical psychology. And when I approached midlife, which was 12 years ago, I'm 52 right now. When I approached midlife, I was putting in Google midlife, and it auto corrected, finished the search for me, automatically typed in the word crisis, and there was endless ways that I was supposed to be fearing what was coming.
Yeah.
And I thought, there's no inspiration here. Where is the alternative storyline? And I committed then and there at 40 years old that I was going to make my midlife journey completely different based in the spirituality of aging. And that's what I've been doing for the past 12 years.
And that's the type of leaders we all need. I've developed a gut brain method where I combine science with mindfulness. And that's what sounds like you're doing. The clinical background, that's what makes you such a legitimate leader. And that's what I'm about to get into, the science. And then we'll get into somatic practices, which is embodiment and body work, as well as mindfulness, which, like I said, the leaders like you, it is such an honor to have you and to talk to you today. Let's talk about health. A lot of women in my practice or my listeners, they come to think about their health during midlife when they start to have some health issues, when they get feedback from either their doctors or their body that whatever they're doing up until this point is not optimal. It's somehow, and they need to create some changes, and they feel confused. They either come to my office because of the weight gain, because of the menopause diagnosis, or hormonal imbalances. And nowadays, the hormonal imbalances shift much younger, like much younger girls start to have issues with PCOS, hormonal imbalances that they fear that there's something's wrong with them way before midlife. Could you please address that issue? And that's how a lot of women get the wake up call that something that they're doing is incorrect.
Yes, I take a very different approach. I am very natural in all of my lifestyle, including my midlife journey as it relates to menopause. I'm currently on my second round of no period. I had no period for 5 months a year ago. Then I got my periods back. Now I'm on 4 months of no period. I am starting to have hot flashes in December. I'm having some depth perception issues, and very dry eyes. But for the most part, I am approaching it through a very different lens. I am not taking any hormone replacement therapy. I am very committed to doing this the same way I gave birth to my children naturally. I believe that nature knows what it's doing. I trust deeply in my body. Every time I have over interfered with my body, I have ended up wreaking more havoc. And so I like to honor the phases of my life. And that is a very different experience than I think how most people approach it. So for me, it is more about the practices as I'm going through. So let me give an example. When my depth perception started having issues as I was starting this perimenopausal journey, I couldn't tell when I was walking through, let's say, the lobby of a hotel, where there was a difference in change from a carpet to a hard tiled floor. My brain was perceiving it as a step. And so what I learned is I could berate myself for that. I could run to a doctor. But what I decided is, Amanda, you've been moving pretty fast your whole life.
Mm.
Maybe midlife is asking you to slow your step down and be more present with every step. So that's how I move now. And I've made everyone in my life, in my circle, very clear that I'm going to take my steps a bit slower and more cautiously than the pace you're used to me, like the New York City pace that I kept for most of my
Yeah.
life. So, and then with the hot flashes at night, I'm waking up and I have a fan now next to my bed, and I stand in front of the fan with my arms outstretched, no clothes on. And I say to myself, what else needs to burn away? What else in this patriarchal pace is no longer serving me that I need to burn away? So when I was having periods and I would bleed, as I was bleeding, I would ask, what else do I need to release? I'm doing the same as I have hot flashes. And with my dry eyes, I use a dry eye mask every night before bed. It's a warming mask for 10 minutes. And I put it on right before I fall asleep. And it is my time to check in with myself. And it's the most beautiful and soulful ritual, where before I was falling asleep with thoughts of what I didn't get finished for the day. So I have decided to rewrite what every symptom means and the opportunity and gift inside of it. I don't want to cover it up. I don't want to make it go away. I don't want to feel like I did when I was 40, because I'm not. I'm 52. And I want to cross the bridge into what the crone has waiting for me. Just the way I wanted to cross the bridge in natural childbirth experience, I knew that I had to go through that to become the kind of mother that I wanted to become. And I know that I have to go through this naturally to become the leader that I want to continue to become.
Wow, that is a very refreshing way of approaching this. And I really admire your approach in sharing your personal story. But from your clinical practice and working with women, what advice do you have for women who are struggling with extra weight or hormonal imbalances, and specifically like PCOS and menopause? Because that's the feedback they get from their doctors. They get a diagnosis, and very often the treatment options are just very limited. And trusting your body, that requires a lot of empowerment, right? And I try to bridge the mind and body for most clients, but sometimes doctors authority is much stronger and they end up on medication. So from your perspective, what advice do you have for women that are dealing with some sort of diagnosis, specifically maybe like start with weight gain, which is not a diagnosis, but it's a symptom or a nagging problem that women have.
But why is it a nagging problem? Based on who says who, right? So it's like when we are looking at the patriarchal definition of what a woman's body is supposed to look like, who says that gaining some weight in midlife and beyond, who says there's something wrong with that? So if we are continuing to base the measurement on what an outside world is telling us women are supposed to fear this weight. As I'm gaining some more weight, I'm seeing it as like my body is becoming more womanly than it's ever been. I am not going to sit in shame for that. I'm not going to berate myself for that. And I think it's very sad that when women get to this other place in life and their body is shifting and changing, that we don't honor that. Instead, we try to make it problematic or pathologize it. And so I am more interested in helping women, and what my work does is takes them on a very long 6-month journey. I work with women from around the world in
Mhm.
groups of 30 pods. So there's 30 women in each cohort, and we go on a deep dive for 6 months, and we meet very regularly. And I'm helping them uncover and unpack all of the pieces of their life that they've never fully processed. More often than not, extra weight, autoimmune disease, cancer is because of emotions that have not been processed, that have
Yeah,
been stuffed down into the body. So
yeah.
I help women stop drinking. I help women get off of antidepressants, anti-anxieties. Listen, if they want to stay on, I'm fabulous. But my clients report after working with me for 6 months, I don't want to. You've given me the tools to embrace and feel everything. So my work is very different. My work is about radical responsibility and going in and sourcing from within in regards to everything that you are feeling. In my work, we're not bypassing or putting band-aids or quick fixes on anything.
I love that. Yes, definitely. That's what I try to teach my clients when like they are so hard on themselves, right? And like self-compassion, self-kindness, and then dig deeper. What's the real problem here, right? And very often it's this perception of stress, right? And everything stresses them out, and it's just like it's accepted by the society that you have to be like it's like, everything's triggering, everything's stressful. What's your advice for perception of stress, especially when women are going through different changes or different diagnoses or symptoms?
Yeah, you have to change the rules. If the rules don't feel good to you, stop living by them. Like the rule that I was told was that as a woman aging, you become irrelevant. No one is interested in what you have to say. You'll become disposable, ugly, and just cast aside. I don't believe that. So I changed the rule for my life. I wrote my own rule that says, no, as a matter of fact, the older I get, the more powerful I get, the more relevant I become, the more wisdom I hold, the more I'll command a space in a room. So write different rules. This is why women are so sick, is because they're playing by the rules written by men that were not intended to be buoyant for women. There's a book called Invisible Women that is based on data and research from around the world that showcases how there's really nothing in the medical system that supports or has looked at or has gathered data based on women, because women's bodies are cyclical and changing. So every workout program, supplements, diets, all of this has been written based on research from men and men's bodies. We don't have research that looks at what women need. And what women need is more emotional support. They need more of the feminine in their life and less of this push, 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 check the patriarchal boxes on the checklist and keep going. That's why women are suffering and struggling, because they're living by rules that weren't written for them.
Wow, I could definitely relate to that. And what's your advice on like this? I feel like it all comes down to mindset, like the empowerment. It's like so refreshing to hear from you. What advice do you give for women who are understanding what you're saying, and it's very empowering and it's inspiring, but they're struggling to embody that? How do you
You
approach
have to get into community. You have to get into proximity to people who are living that way. Find someone who's living that way, leading that way. Get yourself into communities of women who these are the conversations they want to have. This is the work they want to do. Then it becomes so incredible. And I fill everything that I do with so much pleasure. So this journey is so luxurious and so pleasurable. You Women tell me, Amanda, I would rather die than go back to the way I was living before I was working with you. I didn't even know this way of being existed for women, because it's not taught. Most women are still in the hamster wheel of the patriarchy.
Wow. All right, so tell us more about some of the transformations that women experience from. I guess you do have the community. Tell us all more about like the community that you've built and how you work with women.
I do. So my first entry level to work with me is my community on Facebook, right? It's a low ticket offer where you get there's a guided journey. You can come in for a month at a time. You can stay for a year, but it is where we begin with what I call the inner maiden. So the little girl version of you that you abandoned, because research shows between the ages of 8 and 10, young girls stop listening to their intuition. They start listening to what the world expects from them. They start performing and becoming pleasing for the outside
Mm,
society.
mm,
So we do the work on the inner maiden, then we go to reparenting yourself. I teach women how to process through rage and grief effectively so it becomes renewable energy. So there's this whole profound guided journey in my Facebook community. And then from there, I have more elevated experiences, either my live events, which travel the world, called Magnetic, or I also have my mastermind, which is very intense, 6-month journey with 30 women at a time from around the world. I also have just written a book that comes out March 4th. It's called Muse.
how gorgeous. Where can we get it?
On Amazon, Muse, the magnetism of women who stop abandoning themselves. Everything I'm talking about is in this book,
I have.
because there is another narrative. There's a much more beautiful narrative for what it means to be a woman on a more self-led journey than what's being offered to us.
Okay, so Facebook community, the book, and what are and you said the global events that you have. Do you have any
Yes.
events in the United States? coming
I
up?
am I am going to be announcing one in the United States that's going to be in November. Yes. But for now, I have May 2nd and 3rd in Barcelona. I had one in this past November in Phoenix, but Barcelona is the next one in May. And then there will be one in November in the US that I'm announcing in a few weeks.
Amazing. So many incredible opportunities to work with you. But let's get back to the woman that's listening to us and wants to learn from you. I love when you share your personal experience. And what advice do you have for women on like mindfulness and holistic practices, like to start right away today to be feeling better and
Mhm.
to have a different mindset? Is there anything like quick things that or useful tips that you give right away?
Yes, the number one thing I would do is begin a 90-day mirror practice. So every day before you when you wake up, before you turn on your phone, before you consult the world about how you're supposed to feel, you go to the mirror and you create how you're supposed to feel. So I remember finding a photo of my daughter that I took when she was 9 months old. She's now 22 years old, but I found a photo of her many years ago in a box, and she was 9 months old, and I'd just taken her out of the bath, and she'd crawled over to this big mirror in our bathroom, and she pulled herself up, and she was staring at herself in the mirror, and I got my camera and took a photo of it because the awe and wonder in her face was just extraordinary.
Mhm.
That photo got developed and put away, and I found it years later, and I it struck me so intensely because I thought to myself, when do young girls stop going to the mirror and being in awe and wonder? When do young girls go to the mirror and look at everything that is wrong and critique themselves? And so that started me on this journey. And I thought, wonder what would happen to me if my start of every day was in the mirror. I'm going to do that for 2 to 3 minutes every morning before I do anything for 90 days and see what happens. And I'm telling you, my nervous system changed. My whole body changed. And now it is something I teach at my live events. It is a non negotiable in my work. And women report the most mind blowing, beautiful results because we go to the mirror to critique, to fix, to hide, to cover up, to perfect, but we don't go to the mirror to honor. And so when you go to the mirror to honor, it's a very different experience. And you start to have this very spiritual connection with your soul. And then that energy is unmovable in the world. She moves through the world and she understands that all this bullshit marketing that people are trying to sell to her to look younger, look more youthful is nothing more than trying to drain her pocketbook and to keep her enslaved to a story of being for the male gaze. A woman like me understands how insulting that is. And so when I start in the mirror every morning, I then move into the world with this royal energy that is so potent and so unstoppable, and why I'm able to source from within because I'm not looking outside for other people's approval.
Wow.
I've started in the mirror with my own every morning.
Wow, that's definitely like even listening to you, it's just so empowering and so beautiful. And what advice do you have for women who, like you start the work with yourself, right, with the mirror, and then how do you approach others when you start seeing when a woman and you hear it? For example, I hear my clients, they're so negative towards themselves,
Mhm.
so unkind, and so like that's when they end up in my office like I have to lose this belly weight, like all of this is stressing me out. I've tried every diet, I'm doing so much, and they come to me for an advice, for very specific advice, and I end up teaching them kindness and stop the self abandonment, what you just said, right? And sometimes I have to stop them and be like, excuse me, that's my client you're talking about, you can't be so nasty towards that person that I'm about to treat. And that sometimes like it does, like that's why I started teaching mindfulness and taking them
Mhm.
into this mindful state or like memory. When did you start feeling that? Of course everyone starts crying, right? And the inner child healing, and how now it is our responsibility to reparent ourselves. So my question is more like, how do you then approach others when you see others doing that, or your partner maybe like still treats you in the way that like the old you are used to, and how do you renegotiate this relationship? Do
Mhm.
you teach others the same, or do you stop them, do you interrupt them, or you just distance yourself from them? What's your advice?
Yeah, I've removed myself from a lot of circles. I cannot be in circles where people talk about things or other people. I like to be in circles where people talk about ideas. I'm not
Mhm.
interested in sitting around talking about what skincare routine somebody has or what med spa they're attending and what they're having done. I find it insulting for my time in my life. My life is for so much more than that. I'm so much more than just my face and the lines on it. So I removed myself from a lot of social circles that do not align. I'm a soulful, intense person, and that's the kind of proximity I want with others. In my relationship with, with my husband, when I decided 12 years ago that I was going to approach this very naturally, he's 6 years older than me. I said, like you did, like how you approached aging so naturally. Like I didn't see you running around freaking out about aging. I too am going to do the same thing, because men are considered, they become revered silver foxes and more sexy and distinguished. And I thought, well, I'm going to do exactly what you're doing. He's like, oh, okay, cool. That's awesome. um, because I didn't ask him his opinion. This is my body. So I kind of declared what I was doing. Right. And there's so much more respect for a woman who declares what she's doing and has passion and conviction behind it. And then a couple of months ago, I was with my mother and my mother in law, who are 70, 75, and 83, respectively. And we'd been on a trip with them for a couple of days with my father-in-law and my mom's husband as well. And we're at the very end of the trip. We're having the final meal. We're sitting at this table, the six of us, and the two women start talking about the weight they've gained, how frizzy their hair looks in the pictures because we were in a tropical climate. How much, complaining about a couple of things. And I took my hands and I slammed my hands down on the table. And I said, stop, stop. What are you doing? You are both supposed to be my role models for what it looks like to age. Is this as good as it gets for me?
Yeah.
Is what I get to look at and say, oh, wow, I'm so excited. All the way into my 80s, I'll still keep complaining about how I look and my body.
Yeah.
Right. And it was this very shocking and jarring moment for them. And I said, I have not heard the men do that once on this entire trip.
Yeah.
And I want more for all of us. And I'm looking to you as my role models to give me more than that.
Yeah.
And it was very jarring for them. So yeah, I do call people higher. I do.
I could totally relate. And that takes a lot of like leadership abilities to
Mm-hmm.
be able to just like take responsibility for first for yourself, for your inner like environment, and then for the outer. And I found that sometimes it's like it scares people when you tell them like you have to distance yourself and find eventually a new circle. It becomes very lonely at first. And they're like, I thought I was doing the good things. And like even to take responsibility, because very often what you just mentioned, the environment, oh, they're just talking about all this random stuff that all the girls are talking about, all the salons or whatever they're doing, right? And then like there's nothing wrong with that societally, right? But I don't want to be part of that. And then how do you take responsibility that how do you communicate that to these people that excuse me, I'm sorry, but this is not inspiring. I don't want to be part of this. I'd rather find myself like a new circle. You know what I mean? Like how do you negotiate that? Or
Well,
yeah.
I think you start to take the conversation in different directions and see if they're willing and able. And over
Mhm.
time, if you keep redirecting the conversation and it keeps coming back to these superficial things, you don't really have to explain anything. You already have your answer. You just quietly stop responding or exit, or I've never made people wrong. There's nothing wrong with these women.
Mhm.
It's just a different choice. It's not how I want to spend my life and my energy and my time. I don't want to spend it in superficiality. So doesn't mean they're wrong or they're bad. It's just not a choice that I want to be a part of. So you don't have to explain anything to anybody. You just slowly remove yourself from environments that don't feel soulful and nourishing anymore.
Okay, so you embody a lot of leadership in you, and that's super inspiring. What's your advice for the types of women that are naturally born leaders, stepping into the empowered version of themselves and leading the new way and leading like the embodiment of their truth and their confidence and yeah, and like finding their voice and their way?
I would say to lead, you have to be deeply integrated.
Mm.
So you cannot lead practices that you read online somewhere or you took from somebody else or you heard a phrase about, to parrot things. And I see a lot of people parrot my work, and I know that it's an easy way to copy and paste somebody's work. But if you don't embody it when the camera's off, you don't live it, you will plateau. You cannot take clients to places that you've not gone before, into depths and places that you've not gone. I can't teach my clients rage release practices if I don't know how to get on the floor and rage myself.
Exactly.
Right. So it's like, if you really want to be a leader, don't lead before you're ready. Like, really, I spent years becoming profoundly integrated in my practices before I started teaching them in the world, because I am here for the longevity of my leadership and results for my clients.
Wow. Okay, I love it. So you shared how to find you. Anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up this? How, yeah, how do people find you? I love the book, The Muse, right?
Yes.
What's the title?
Muse, the magnetism of women who stop abandoning themselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
But
interesting.
as far as reaching me on Instagram or any of that, that's midlife Dr. Amanda Hanson or Midlife Muse. You will find me. And my website is amandahanson.com.
Last word of advice, like for the leader types of women, I feel like the fear is that to negotiate the partnerships because like you're definitely not a beta, and that's what a lot of strong partners expect. So how do you renegotiate that when it's two alphas, two power personas in the couple, and to become that power couple? I feel like this is our future of a humanity, but it's still being renegotiated as we go, like in the partnerships dynamics.
Yeah, I've been married 28 years, and my husband was saying at dinner last night, and he's said this for years, but one of the things he was saying is that we've created so much impact in the world in so many ways. And we help so many people, whether it's financially, philanthropically, in the ways we've opened our doors, our homes, our hearts to people of every background you could ever imagine. The impact we have made is profound. And he was kind of doing a walk down memory lane last night. And he's like, babe, think about what we've done to individually and together. And we both got very emotional. And we were saying, like, if people could just realize, and this is what he was saying, if men could just realize that the most important decision they will ever make
Mm-hmm.
is to marry a powerful woman, because
Yeah.
a powerful woman will help you take anything you have, any dream you have, anything you want to create. She will help you 100 times it, and she'll bring all the beauty and the feminine essence to it. And that's what being married to you has done for our life, our family, his business, my business. And so I think that there's a big misunderstanding to have someone who's just like there as your support character and your support role, because what we both realize is he has profound strengths that he leads our family and our life in that I don't have. And I have profound strengths that I lead our life and our family in that he doesn't have. And so the complement of those two create this power couple he's so much better at his business because of my influence and what he learns consulting with me. I'm so much better at my life and my business because his consultation and our nightly walks together. And when we download and help each other through certain aspects, and even with the parenting together. So for anybody listening, a really strong, beautiful, divine masculine will feel very comfortable and intrigued to have a woman who is walking in her queen energy next to him.
Wow, the amount of work that you've done for women, elevating this beautiful divine feminine. Do
Mm.
you see the ratio and the amount of work that divine masculine is doing at the same time? Could you like where I'm going with this is to like what are the statistics for creating those matches and how hard it is for women that are doing more conscious work and more embodiment work and realizing that they don't want to be leading by the programming of their ancestors. They want to lead in a new way, and from what I hear, the statistics, the more embodied and conscious you become of your strength, the harder it is for you to find the divine masculine. Can you address that, please?
Yes, I think because what we were accepting or saying yes to at one time before, what our grandmothers and mothers said yes to, and feeling like there were much more limited options, even in what they were allowed to want or desire, our generations are increasing that, right? And moving that measurement. And in doing so, what I find is not many men are doing the work to meet or match what women now require to be in relationship. And so unless we really start to see men step up to the plate and be the biggest struggle I see is most men, when I'm working with women and they're sharing something about their husband or they bring their husband on camera to talk to me, most men naturally come from this really defensive, reactive place that it's almost like a little boy who thinks he's getting yelled at or caught for having his hand in the cookie
Mhm.
jar, as opposed to, no, no, no. This is about building a bridge for something incredible together. But
Mhm.
until men are able to do that inner reflection and stop being so activated and reactive and defensive, I don't see how we're actually going to be able to create change together. That is the main thing. I see a lot of men still acting like they're 5 years old in the sandbox and like, no, that's my shovel and I want it this way and this way only. And until they're able to say, oh, wow, well, there's other perspectives here in this sandbox. Let me see what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Maybe we can come together and have a beautiful collaboration rather than a dictatorship. And as evidenced by the leadership in our country and many places in the world, we see that there's just people are dictating what the experience is rather than collaborating what the human experience should be.
Okay, I have to ask you this question. The long lasting union and the relationship, the family that you built, what's your advice for those who find that incredibly inspiring and want to build
Yeah.
something and for the long term partnership vision? What does it mean?
Yeah, it's not been easy. I'm going to be honest, it's not been easy. And so if you expect it to not require work, I think there's this idea that if you have to work at it, maybe it's not right. Now, obviously, if you're ever being emotionally abused, physically harmed in any way, put down, belittled, disrespected, of course get out. That is not a safe collaborative space. We don't do that. We have hard conversations. We have misunderstandings. We have places and spaces in our life where we don't necessarily agree, but we continue to honor and respect and try to come with curiosity. I would say bring as much curiosity to the conversations as possible to understand the other person's perspective. Doesn't mean at the end you're going to agree, but maybe you can find a middle ground. But don't think it's something is wrong if you're having to constantly reevaluate. And we have intense conversations every single week. So it is not like we've pushed automatic, just letting this thing drive itself. We're constantly in evolution together and reevaluating what we need in the relationship.
Another question on the same topic. So, how old were you when you got married?
23,
So that's relatively early. So there's
very
this
young.
philosophy right now that marry later, get all the experience before, and then when you marry once, and then it lasts, right? Versus what's your advice on like getting all this wisdom and developing the personality or the embodiment alone, and then marrying already powerful into a powerful leader, or what you've done with your partner, you grew together into this powerful couple. So what's your advice for women who are afraid of entering relationship until they become this embodied version of themselves that
Gosh, it's such a tricky one to answer, right? Because I can tell you that there's many aspects to me now that are the same as when we got married. But in all truth, I was in my princess era, right? I was still in that young princess energy of like love solves all and everything's going to be dreamy and perfect. And as soon as it got hard, I was like, oh my gosh, what is this all about? He doesn't love me. I resent him for traveling. He misunderstands me. I think I married the wrong person, right? Now I've been willing to do the work and evolve into this like different energy of being the queen of my life. And he's done a lot of work and he's evolved. So had we stayed the same, I don't think we would still be together because we were butting heads too much. Um, but there is something really irreplaceable about marrying young and growing together. If you have someone, so what often happens is one person evolves in this direction and one evolves in this direction. And sometimes the chasm in between is too great. We've evolved in different ways, but the chasm was never so great. The common thread of the passion that we have for each other and the legacy we're building has always been greater. And that's been what's brought us and held us together, even in turbulent times. I don't think there's a wrong way to do it. If you fall in love really young and grow together, beautiful and amazing. We don't know how that's going to go. Right. But like my daughter, for example, is wildly in love and she's been with him for 2.5 years. They're probably going to get married. And she's only 22. And she said, Mom, this is not what I ever would have imagined. But why would I break up? And he is a profound divine masculine. Why would I break up with him to just go do what? She's like me. She's very strong. She's very much in her power and her leadership. And so I can't advise her, no, break up with him and go be single for a while. Be single for a while for what purpose? But also sometimes there are women I love and adore in my life who are in their mid to late 30s and on that journey still. And they're like, I refuse to settle for something that doesn't feel beautiful and divine for me. And that's okay too. I don't think that there's a one size fits all answer there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I have two questions. One is if you want to like, maybe give another advice on like how to establish, like when you know you're going through transformation as a woman, right, and there's a partner next to you that is also going through his own stuff. How do you, what's your advice on like these types of conversations that you have, like the more vulnerable, the more heartfelt, when you're still, learning the depths of your own transformation and the other person, and how do you choose to grow together and to transform together? Like any advice on those conversations, because very often when we're young we never learn how to do that, and as we grow older you have to almost, like, it's easier almost to get a divorce, and to leave and start fresh, then realize like you can reestablish, renegotiate this connection to get into the depths. So any advice on that?
Yes, I love that question. And it does require really crystal clear communication that is not in finger pointing or blame. So for me, it was being able to sit down and say, I'm scared. I'm scared that where we are right now is not going to take us all the way to the end together. And I love you and I want to keep building this life with you. And for the sake of our children and everything that we've done so much together, but I'm scared we're not going to make it because what I needed 10, 15 years ago was very different than what I need now in a partner and in a relationship. So I'm here wanting to renegotiate a way forward and what this can look like. I can share with you some of the things that I'm desiring and need. And I want to hear from you what you're desiring and what you're needing. And I remember saying, and I know for certain that my path of evolution will be all the way until my final breath. And there will be many versions of me. And my hope and prayer is that every time I look over my shoulder, you're there on the path. You don't have to be right next to me. You can be on your own pace, but I sure hope you're there and that it doesn't get so far apart that we can't find each other anymore. And so if you're willing to be with a woman who is going to be in evolution forever and ever, then I'd love to do this together. And that was kind of how we came to this whole place, right? Because I was suffocating trying to stay in the box that I married into and the role that I
Mhm.
married into. It was killing
Mhm.
me.
Yeah. My God, that's so beautifully said. I do have another question for women reaching their 40s and still not married and still not finding the power partner for themselves. Your advice on IVFs and freezing eggs specifically, because it's something that most women are now being aware of, how they need to take responsibility for their dream and for the future, but now it's being pushed back. And what's your advice? Because so many women are trying to take this like God's path, like let's see what's going to happen and trust. And then there's gets pushed and advice like, no, take responsibility while you're young, freeze your eggs, which is not an easy process, but a lot of people are advocates for that. And I work with those women, and very often they ask me for advice, and I would love to hear from the psychologist perspective.
Again, as a woman who got pregnant, I can't imagine, and I would be ill advising. I'm going to say some things, but I would be ill advising to even imagine what that situation is like. So I deeply honor and respect that every woman's decision is so profoundly personal to her. I don't think that something like that comes without other repercussions long term and probably some health possibilities of, I don't know if we have enough long term data to say what it looks like to create a situation, because you're going to have to give yourself so many injections and the hormones, the destabilization of the body. I'm not sure what that looks like long term. Um, and I'd also like to offer that, I've also adopted children, and I know the idea of being pregnant is so beautiful, but you still get to be a mother, and you don't need a partner to do that. You can be a mother either through surrogacy, or you can be a mother through a sperm donor. You can be a mother through adoption. If mothering is the ultimate journey and goal, there are so many children who need homes.
Mhm. Okay. All right. And then let's wrap up then on community building. You said that's the journey where everyone should start, creating these new networks and women around you that are inspiring and that you could give, receives emotional support that you said so important for women. What's your advice on building, finding, or creating those networks?
Well, I think, a beautiful way to create the network is first establish what it is that you're so desiring. So many, many years ago, I was desiring, I was living in Connecticut, between Connecticut and New York at the time, and I was really desiring. This is when I was going through a lot of this, and I was so fatigued at the surface level conversations and get-togethers, and I was craving profound, profound, beautiful conversation. And
Mhm.
so I put it out there in my community. And this was my personal Facebook page. I created like a 7-minute video talking about my desire. I had 147 women respond. 65 showed up to my home. Half of them brought bottles of wine. I said, "Oh no, when you leave your shoes at the front door, please leave the bottle of wine. I want to do this not with a drinking culture tied to it. I really want women to learn to have vulnerable conversations without alcohol."
Yeah.
And so then you can imagine, because of that, only 30 women came back. So in the future, right? Because they're like, "Oh, forget this. I don't know how to do intimacy without alcohol."
Yeah.
So, and then we journeyed together for 6 months, and we had like a theme. Everybody kind of like, we had a box that we sent around the room, and everybody got to like talk or vote on which themes they wanted to talk about. And we had incredible, epic, beautiful community. And so you can start, if what you desire doesn't exist, be the leader who starts it. And if you don't want to start it, find a community of women being in spaces and listening to women that you align with and join their communities.
I have to ask you this question. Somehow, what you just described, like, reminded me of the movie Eat, Pray, Love.
Yeah.
So, from your professional perspective, like, everyone watched that movie and everyone found it inspiring. Just like throw it all out, the midlife crisis at this point, right? What's your advice for women going through something similar?
Going through a midlife moment.
Or, yeah, like, and the relationships, or just finding, like, throwing it all out, or finding a new way, finding a new love.
I think it's so exhilarating and such an opportunity. I think up until this point, your tolerance level is much higher for putting up with a lot of bullshit. And when
Yeah.
you come to this middle of your life, I realize that if all goes well, it's half over for me. So I don't have conversations to waste. I don't have time to give away any longer. It has to really matter for me to be a part of it. And so when you are facing death and the other side, you get real immaculate with how you show up in your lifetime. And so I see it as a beautiful, in Japanese, the word crisis means dangerous opportunity. So I
Ooh.
see midlife as a dangerous opportunity to reinvent everything. And I'm having so much fun, not only doing it for myself, but showing other women how to do it. And for every other woman, every single one of my clients, I currently have 74 clients, and every one of them is doing it in her own beautifully unique way. But it's incredible to witness.
You're so inspiring. Tell us about the get together, or what is it called? The conference in Barcelona that you're having this year?
Yes, it's magnetic. It's a 2-day event that is from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. and it is deeply experiential. This is not me standing on a stage teaching, and this is me demonstrating and then on the floor in the room with the women doing experiential practices that will, without a doubt, change the constitution of how you've ever lived as a woman.
Why Barcelona?
Because I have a lot of clients in Europe. And my mission, I have a global impact. I have clients on every continent. So I don't want this just to be a US thing. I want this to be for women around the world.
I love it. And how many women are you expecting?
300.
300. Wow. And do you still work one on one?
No,
No. Okay. Just, I'm
no.
sure there's a lot of people that would be interested in discussing their unique, situation.
The reason I don't work one on one anymore is because the quantum leap of working in a cohort of 30 women is mind blowingly inspiring. And what happens is women are kind of popcorning off of each other. So I teach, I build a very safe, I spent the first month building really safe sisterhood and community. And then we go for the next 5 months into all these deep, I teach 4 different archetypes for being a woman, for the different energies and how to navigate your life. And these women historically go on to be lifelong friends. These women open their hearts in ways that they could have never imagined. They end up declaring and claiming things they wouldn't have been brave enough to do until they watched other women start doing it. And these women go to each other's uh, weddings. These women go to these women vacation all over the world together. These women come to my events in cohorts of 20 and 30 together. So I believe so much in community that I want the byproduct of my work to be like, okay, you learn this new language and this new way of being a woman, and now you have a whole community of women to travel and journey with for the rest of your life.
To close off this incredible interview, I have a question for you. How do you define muse, and what does sisterhood feels like to a muse that never experienced
Mm.
it before?
The muse to me is, we've always historically thought of the muse as someone who inspires others. Some of the greatest artists and painters and musicians of the world had their muse. And I was looking for a muse in early midlife to be inspired by, and I couldn't find her. So I just decided, why don't I just become the muse? And this is what I teach every woman, like, you get to be the muse of your own life. And that's why I teach the 4 archetypes that live underneath the muse, so that she can be so self-resourced within and inspire herself on her entire journey, no matter what she's experiencing. And when women do that, we've been conditioned and trained to be afraid of other women and to be in competition with other women. And in my world, that is it's a non-negotiable. Sisterhood is sacred in my world. And I teach women. I spend an entire month when I open the community for that 6-month journey. I spend an entire month helping them deconstruct their beliefs and fears about other women,
Mm-hmm.
and how we are going to also deconstruct the internalized misogyny that we all have, the hatred of women we carry from the conditioning that we've all been under. And from there, I teach them immaculate sisterhood and how we are going to journey for the next several months together. But it is some of the most powerful, life-changing narrative. And what happens is these women often turn around and repair situations with their own mothers, their own sisters, where there were ruptures before, because we learn from our mothers how to be in sisterhood and what it means to be a woman. And more often than not, we did not learn beautiful things.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to this. Dr. Amanda, I feel like this has been my favorite interview so far. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and for your beautiful soul shining through it and inspiring so many women. I mean, you truly embody being a muse for so
Mm.
many women. And yeah, just from my heart, thank you for your time today and for sharing yourself.
You're so
I'd love
welcome.
to join you in Barcelona. Like, when is it? You didn't mention the date.
May 2nd and 3rd.
May 2nd or 3rd. Oh my God, almost like in 3 months coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much,
Well,
Ella, for
thank
having
you.
me.
All right. And thank you everyone for watching and for listening. Make sure to follow Dr. Amanda at Midlife Muse on Instagram. I love her reels and videos. It's one of the most, like, she goes straight to the point and speaks straight to your heart and all your issues. You definitely relate to a lot of people.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.